Hi, I'm Matthew Craig and you're watching The Market Bull. Joining me online today is Imagion Biosystems Executive Chairman, Bob Prue. Welcome, Bob.
Hey, nice to be here. Thanks for the invite.
So firstly, just give us a brief overview about Imagion, their breakthrough MagSense technology and why it's different versus what is currently available today.
Yeah, so today I think most people are familiar that we've got multiple ways to do medical imaging. You've got computed tomography, CT, MRIs, X-ray, there's a variety of different ways, ultrasound, variety of different ways to image the body. But they cannot tell you if what they see is actually cancer or not, right? They can't differentiate a benign tumor from a malignant form of cancer. They see something that looks suspicious, and then we need to go do biopsies to really confirm the disease state. And that's what we're trying to change. So Imagion has developed a magnetic particle that has cancer-specific antibodies or moieties on them that causes our particle to bind specifically to a type of cancer. So when our particles show up on an MRI, we not only see the typical high-resolution image of the lesion that might look suspicious, but if our particles are present, they're actually a confirmation that it's cancer because they're there because of a targeted particle that's really targeted for the cancer. So we're trying to change MRI from being, hey, that looks suspicious, to that not only looks suspicious, but in fact we can identify the molecular specificity that it's cancer. And that's a big change. That's a new class of imaging agents for MRI.
So IBX just lodged its first IND application with the US FDA. What does this milestone mean for the MagSense HER2 Imaging Agent?
Yeah, so finally now getting our Investigational New Drug application into the FDA is a pretty big milestone for almost any biotech company, right? Most companies can get through the preclinical research. You heard a lot of the adages about how many mice we've treated for cancer, but not very many mice have been cured, right? And so the way you end up doing that is you go through the clinical phases. Phase 1 is typically a safety kind of study. But it's really getting into phase 2 and the later phases of clinical research where you start to really understand whether or not the commercial success might be there. And so for us, we did a phase 1 study back in 2023. And so now filing this IND means that we're now ready to move into the next phase of clinical testing where we can really start to demonstrate the clinical effectiveness of our imaging agent. And so it's a big milestone for any biotech company. For us as a very small company, being able to demonstrate to the FDA that we've done all of our homework with regard to the science that's involved, the chemistry that's involved, manufacturability, making sure we're meeting all the quality standards that are needed in a clinical study, I think that's where you start to separate the wheat from the chaff with regard to many biotech companies, because there's so much involved in getting through the regulatory process. And so I'm very proud of the fact that we've managed to go ahead and submit that IND. We'd had a lot of communication with the FDA leading up to that, so we're pretty comfortable with our filing. But yeah, I mean it's a big milestone for a company of our size to actually now be able to go into a phase 2 study.
Just how is preparation for the phase 2 clinical trial in HER2 breast cancer progressing?
So we've been anticipating that we'll have a pretty smooth sail through our regulatory review. We had communication with the FDA throughout the last year and a half with regard to that. So while we're now in the review phase with the FDA, we've already been taking steps to be able to initiate that study as soon as we get FDA clearance for it. So we've already identified at least one clinical site. We think that we'll be ready to go with a couple of clinical sites as soon as we get FDA clearance. We've already got all the vendors lined up that will help us manage the study and analyze the images, etc. So we're anticipating being able to hit the ground running, so to speak, late Q1, early Q2 to actually start enrolling patients into the study.
So Bob, take us through the timeline for the phase 2 study and perhaps what will be the most important takeaways to ensure its successful completion?
So we've broken the study down into 3 parts. The first part is a very short piece where we need to do a little bit of sampling of 3 to 10 patients. The FDA has asked us that they want to see some what's known as pharmacokinetic data. We're administering this drug to patients. They want to see a little bit of pharmacokinetic data. So those patients, we'll collect some blood samples from them. We'll do some analysis, and assuming that everything comes out the way we expect, we'll be able to then roll from that first few patients where we're collecting pharmacokinetic data into the first part of the actual phase 2 study, which is imaging timing. And in that part, what we're trying to figure out is how early after we've administered the imaging agent to the patient can we actually start to take the MRI? Do we need to wait 24 hours? Can we do it 2 hours? Can we do it 4 hours after that? Because that, of course, affects ultimately the clinical adoption and clinical use. If you have a patient that you're planning to give this test, can they do it in the same day? Can they do it after 2 hour wait, etc.? So we'll then do the first part of the study, which is we'll take a number of patients, between 10 and 20 patients, and we'll do multiple images per patient to try to find the ideal time for us to be able to image them. And then once we've identified that ideal time, we'll then enroll a larger cohort of patients, probably 40 patients, where we'll do the exact same time for every patient to collect those end data. So the overall goal of the study is, part 1, demonstrate that the pharmacokinetic safety data are there. That'll be our first reported event. We'll have that sometime during this year. Then we will be able to do a cohort of patients where we'll be optimizing the imaging timing, and we'll report those results. And then we'll have the bolus of the patients that will actually go get us the endpoint, which is ultimately to demonstrate that our test is as good, or that pathology is. So if I could avoid doing a biopsy because we can demonstrate that we got the same answer that a biopsy did, now we're on the track to being able to get to clinical validity that says, in fact, I can do this test instead of having to necessarily do biopsies on all these patients.
And just lastly, what news flow and milestones can investors look forward to in early 2026?
Yeah, so the first milestone will be FDA clearance that it's okay to go ahead and start the study. Next one will be that we've initiated enrollment and we've had the first patient into the study. And then I can see that over the course of 2026, we'll be reporting that first cohort of patients on the safety data and the second cohort of patients on the image timing optimization. So I think there will be some nice news flow throughout this year as we continue to progress, getting the study started and getting those first patients in. So we'll be able to go ahead and keep our investor markets updated with the progress of the study, because we've got clear milestones along the way that are worth reporting.
Well, thanks for joining us today, Bob, and good luck for what's up next with IBX.
Thanks very much.